Excuse me, sir. Can you give me your best what?
What?
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
did you know that pizza rolls are just Italian gushers?
What are we doing? Well, on that note, welcome to our very first episode of the What Podcast. This week is probably going to be pretty short, pretty brief. We're just giving an introduction to ourselves and what you can expect while listening to the What Podcast. My name is Mark Stoltenberg.
I'm Devin Livingston.
And I'm Caleb Phillips.
Me and Mark here are going to be the main hosts of this show, and then we got Caleb. And I'll let Caleb kind of explain what he does.
Yeah, so I am their audio recorder. I'm going to be editing it, publishing, and I'm here to make these guys sound pretty and think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, so Caleb does all the hard work.
Yeah, me and Mark are just the poster boys.
Yeah, so each week we're going to do announcements. We'll talk about stuff going on the show, maybe stuff, if you're a Johnson student, stuff going on campus. We'll talk about news, and we'll likely be pretty picky about what we pick. It'll be maybe stuff if the mainstream media isn't covering, or stuff relevant to whatever topic we're talking about that week. We'll get into prayer requests. If people want to send in prayer requests, DM us your prayer requests. We'll be happy to air those if you want, or we'll just be praying for you in private if that's what you'd rather. We'll have a main topic every week where we'll be talking usually with a guest. We've got topics like racial diversity, family relationships and foster care. We've got what it's like to be a young entrepreneur.
Mental health.
Yeah, get into mental health.
And any ideas you guys have as well. We'd love to take topics from you guys. We value your guys' opinions. We think that's important. So
yeah, feel free to DM us or comment any things that you want to start a conversation about.
yeah, you can find us on Instagram, and Twitter, and YouTube. Instagram, it's whatpodcast_official, and on Twitter, it's whatpodcast_. We are on YouTube, and it's W.H.A.T podcast. There is also a link in the Instagram and Twitter bios if you guys are having trouble finding us on YouTube. But yeah, you guys feel free to send us messages or whatever, and we'll try our best to kind of engage with you guys best we can. No promises, though.
We're also going to have a community outreach shout out. We'll talk about different things going on within the Knoxville area that people can get involved in. I'll let Devin talk a little bit more about that. I will also have a question of the week. We'll leave you at the end of the podcast with a question that we will then circle back and talk about next week.
Yeah, so for the community outreach, me and Mark, we're having a conversation. That's kind of how this whole podcast really started, essentially. We were having a conversation of, like, the community and stuff, and watching what's going on in the news and stuff like that, and all that's good. But we were both like, there's all this great stuff going on, but, like, what about the communities? And, people weren't really thinking about the small stuff, except, they want to focus on the big stuff. And so we kind of want to be a bridge that can bridge a gap between the big stuff and the small stuff. So we've got some different ideas. One day we want to be able to host like a field day, I guess you could call it. So we're going to talk to some people, host like a ultimate frisbee, a disc golf tournament, maybe some other stuff where you pay, $5-10 or however much, donations will be accepted, and then the winning team will be able to choose a charity that goes to, and we'll go and donate that to that charity. We hope to make that a thing too, and we want to give you guys some different opportunities to where, if you have something on your heart, you guys can go out into the community and do. So, like, for me, I think homelessness is a thing that kind of gets overlooked a lot with the small stuff. I know there's things out there, but, like, I want to be able to create, like, little gift bags of socks and stuff. So we eventually want to do that one day. take up a collection of stuff, and then go out and spend time with these guys too. That's another important thing to us. And then we're gonna different organizations in the Knoxville area. So I know there's like KidCo, Emerald Youth, and stuff, and we're gonna kind of talk about them and what they do to give you guys some knowledge on that if you guys are not familiar with who they are and what they do. Hopefully get you guys connected. We would like to see a lot of you guys out there in the community too. So that's what that community outreach is all about for us. So Mark, what is can you tell them what stands for?
Yeah, so what is actually an acronym that we came up with? It stands for We Have a Thought. So it's the We Have a Thought podcast.
So how'd you come up with that name? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I was really thinking about the kind of stuff that we are trying to accomplish through doing this, and the different stuff we were talking about in the makings of this podcast and setting it up, what our main goals were, and really it came down to thinking. Like we want to have conversations and think deeper about issues that people aren't talking about. We want to have discussion about the harder topics. I really want to give people who have knowledge and experience in those areas a platform to be able to come on and have a conversation about those things and share their knowledge and experience, because I think we a lot of times don't take advantage of people who have knowledge and experience. We just kind of overlook it.
So is that would you say that's what your motivation was to kind of start this whole thing? I know I'd mentioned kind of how it started, how the idea started, but then what would you say your motivation would be if you had to pin it on one thing?
Discussion. I think that, when you look at even just like the studies done on families, kids who have dinner with their families on a regular basis do better, like have better social lives. And I think that it all comes down to having discussion, right? They're doing better because they're having discussion with their family, and I think it's important for us to have discussion with each other, and to communicate as Christians and as people just how to function together and how to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I agree. Caleb, what about you? What would you say your motivation in being part of this podcast, or whatever you'd like to call it? What would you say?
I mean, I'd still call it a podcast. I don't know what else to call it. But my motivation for me, knowing that I have an impact on how the outcome of it is a big part of it. It's gonna help just get people in discussion, as Mark said, and really make people think more. And I like how you made it. We have a thought. It's a thing that a lot of people, everyone has a thought, but do they share it? Or do they keep it all to themselves? So maybe encourage some people to even branch out a little bit and share their thoughts and opinions as well.
Yeah. For me, I would say, I want to change the world. That's something that is kind of on my heart. Because you see a lot of times, I think I mentioned it earlier, but on the news and stuff, there's so much noise that people get things that are overlooked, small things. And me and Mark and stuff, we really wanted to really create a space where all that noise is kind of down, where we can quiet the noise and break through the noise with different people and different perspectives, because a lot of times people don't see eye to eye, which is fine. Everybody's different, but then, it kind of comes down to understanding different perspectives of things. And so that's kind of what we're really trying to do. And I think that what comes with that is changing the world. I know it's going to be a process and it's going to be one step at a time, but essentially that's what I'm hoping to do. And that's kind of what's motivating me to continue to do this and and take it from just an idea that me and Mark had one day to actually sitting here now, talking to all you guys and being a part of this greater thing that God has given us the opportunity to do. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's what motivated me to do it, and that's what it means to me.
All right, so each week we will end the podcast with a question or two of the week. Give you guys the week to think about it before we come back next week and give our thoughts on it. But given that this is our first podcast and we're short and don't have a whole lot of content to share with you guys, we're going to go ahead and give our thoughts on the questions of the week this week. The first question being, what are some things that you wish people talked more about? So Devin, I'll let you go ahead and start with that. What are some things that you wish people would talk more about?
That's a heavy subject. But I think one thing would be, I don't really know how to say it, but like, I wish people would talk about things that nobody's talking about, and that comes with a whole lot of different things, like race and stuff like that. I know that's a big one right now, and you have so many different things, but like, I wish people would like go and do their research and then talk about like actual research and stuff instead of just taking things for face value. I wish they would talk more about that. Ask the hard questions. If you're not sure about something, because everybody, like I said earlier, everybody has a different perspective. If you're not familiar with that perspective, go ask somebody who may have a perspective on it. Go ask them. Like, hey, what do you think about this? I try to do it. I know some people where I can have some conversations with, and that's the thing too. Find someone you can have those kinds of conversations with and talk about those kinds of things. Wish people would talk more about like mental health. I mean, I know that a lot of people do talk about it, and I know there's a lot of things out there, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty, what really is mental health? People say that it's, I suffer from anxiety, depression, or whatever, and then you have other people who say, oh, no, you don't. Well, what is your definition of anxiety? What is your definition of depression? Because it's different for everybody, and, being able to create a space where you could talk about those things and talk about those things on a personal level without judgment, I think that's really important too. So I guess just to name a few, those are some of the things that I would say.
Yeah. What about you, Caleb? What are some things that you wish that people would get into and talk more about?
Well, Devin definitely touched on a lot of topics there, but I'm just kind of highlight one because it's one that I know I've dealt with personally is mental illnesses, and I wish a lot of people would either look into or even discuss more about how to help other people with those, because coming from a background where I have struggled with those at times, one of the things that a person that's struggling with a mental illness doesn't want to do is talk. A majority of times they don't want to talk to anyone. They want to fix it on themselves, on their own. And when someone tries to strike that conversation, it can feel a little forceful. So I wish people talked more about how to help other people, deal with those problems and kind of work through them, or possibly even lead them to a solution that they can work on to help move on through the situation or through whatever hardship they're in. It's the specifics that a lot of people don't realize. They know it exists, but how do you actually fix it?
Yeah, I'd say I agree with Caleb. I mean, I've been there before too. I've been in that same boat, and Caleb hit it on the head of the nail. Someone who suffers from mental illness, the last thing they want to do is talk about it. And I want to say too, if any of you guys out there are struggling with anything, our DMs are open, our messages are open. We may not be experts, we may not know how to handle it, but we're here to listen, and we'll try our best to connect you with someone who can. But yeah, we don't ever want anything to happen to you guys. So if you guys are really struggling, reach out to someone. So Mark,
Yeah.
what are some things you wish people talked more about?
Yeah, I think you guys touched on some really, really beautiful aspects of just community, right? Taking a topic and just not having to deal with it alone is a big thing. Like not having to deal with your mental illness alone, not having to go through whatever it is you're going through alone, but like having people come alongside each other and push through that and work together through those things. And I think that kind of goes into one of the things that I wish that people would talk more about is the ministry of Jesus, right? There's a book that we had to read for a class. I can't remember for the life of me the name of the author, but it's Speaking of Jesus. It's an amazing book, and his whole point throughout the whole thing is just like consistently pointing back to Jesus. And it, like, reading through that book made me realize like how little we look to Jesus as the example. We talk about Jesus. We talk about how Jesus died for us. We don't really talk about what he did besides that, though. Like, he lived a whole life before he died. He came alongside people and he talked about things with them. He worked through things with people. He loved on people. That was his ministry, was his whole life. And I think I wish that was something that people talked more about and used more as a guiding principle in life.
Yeah, that's definitely something that people miss. I also think it's important though to kind of be cognizant about who you're talking to. I know some people, some good friends who went to church all the time, and then they end up getting burnt by the church, which is a sad thing. And then a lot of times when people try to talk about Jesus, they go in head first talking about Jesus. Well, maybe sometimes that's not the best approach. Maybe sometimes it's subliminal things or things that you kind of slip in there every now and then kind of like get them to start thinking about. It comes with moderation. I think you just gotta be careful of who you're talking to. Like, know your audience. Anybody who's a musician, any type of art form. One thing that they speak about is know your audience. You're gonna target to an audience. Make sure you're talking to an audience. Make sure you know that audience. So.
We have another question of the week, and it's, what are some things you wish people would do more of? And if you wouldn't mind touching on that, Devin.
Yeah, so one thing for me, I honestly, kind of the whole point of this podcast is I wish people would start to think a little more about things in general, like things of the way the world is, and you don't, when people say think, you don't have to think deeply about it necessarily, but more on like a personal level, kind of like what I was saying just a minute ago, thinking about who your audience is and stuff like that. I think that's a good way of doing it. Being coherent and cognizant of things going on around you. I think that's something that I wish people would do more. Don't get tunnel vision, kind of see the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's definitely important. And personally for me, I think kind of going along that same line, expressing yourself through discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We always say actions speak louder than words, but I've always been told actions don't happen unless words are spoken. And so kind of just the idea of people expressing themselves and not being afraid to back up their actions with what they're thinking. Any other thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to kind of touching back on what I was talking about. I just wish people would do more things intentionally. I wish people would have more conversation intentionally. I wish people would do life more intentionally, looking for opportunities to ask questions, to come alongside people, to to help people through things, to love on people. I just wish that we did more things purposefully.
I agree with Mark there. That's something that I think we get missed a lot. I mean, it's good to every now and then have some fun with it and do things lighthearted, but at the same time, be intentional, be purposeful. That's kind of one of the foundations that we built this whole podcast on, was being intentional and being personal and being purposeful and stuff like that. So,
well, and I think too often we fall into this state of letting life happen to us rather than choosing to live life.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who it's by. Somebody showed me it one day, and it's you're not improving yourself unless you're living outside of your comfort zone. And for everybody that's different, but if you're not outside of that comfort zone, then what's the point? What's the point of doing anything? And I'm sure we could all agree that life isn't easy. I know in my personal experience it hasn't been. But
that's an understatement of the century.
Truth there.
But if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. Mm-hmm. I believe in a God the Father, where when I die I'm going to go to heaven, and it's this beautiful thing. And if life was easy for me here, then what would that all be worth? That would just kind of be another thing to look forward to.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in to our first episode. Please let us know what you think about those questions of the week. Just to reiterate there, what are some things that you wish people would talk more about? And then what are some things you wish people would do more of?
Real quick, too, I do want to mention we're going to try to get new episodes out on Wednesdays.
Yes, every Wednesday.
So every Wednesday, that is the hope and the plan. So be looking forward to that. Like we mentioned before, we'd love to hear from you guys. We appreciate the support that you guys give or will give. So we're really glad that God put us in the place that we can have this opportunity, and we want to hear from you guys. So anything you guys have, questions, comments, requests, we want to be intentional with that. So let us know. Everyone have a good week, and see you guys on the flip side.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.